Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. It will just be the man today, no Chan, and we will be previewing and showing predictions for the SEC West, the harder of the two divisions in the SEC. Sorry, Georgia fans, but that's true. And if at any point during this video you like this video, please scroll down and hit that like button. It really helps out. And subscribe if you'd like more content in the future. And we'll be starting out with the defending SEC West champs and runners-up in the college football playoff, Alabama. Sorry for that date. Offensive ranked third in the country. Elite on the offensive end. Guess what? They were just as good on the defensive end. They were 12th in the country. They had 45.6 points per game on offense and 18.1 points per game allowed on defense. Returning production, 63rd. Typical Alabama, where they're probably never going to be first in returning production. They're never going to be last, but they'll be right there in the middle because guess what? They bring in the great NFL talent and they ship out the old NFL talent. 5-year recruiting. Guess what? They're first. Guess what they were in 2019? They were first. There's only been 1 year in the past 5 where they weren't first. They were 5th that year. Key losses, though. They lose a lot. They lose running back Josh Jacobs. Do-it-all running back. Great player. I think he's going to be a fantastic player in the NFL. I think he was underutilized at Alabama, but that's because they have 4 of him, so use them all, right? 887 yards, 14 touchdowns from scrimmage. They also had Damian Harris at running back, 1,080 yards, 9 touchdowns. 2 great players at running back. Guess what? They're going to replace him. They actually got the #1 high school running back in the country. He's out for the year, though, unfortunately, in Trey Sanders. And unfortunately, didn't choose my Texas Longhorns. They also lose Savion Smith, safety Deontay Thompson, defensive tackle Quinnen Williams, defensive lineman Isaiah Buggs, linebacker Mac Wilson, Christian Miller, and they also lose Dylan Moses because of an ACL injury, not to the draft, but he's the only one out of those that they didn't lose to the draft. Unfortunately, ACL injury, and guess what? He's going to be an NFL player next year. Was going to probably be a top 15 pick. He was the best middle linebacker on the board this year, but with that injury, he may fall a few spots. I still think will be a first-round pick. That's a total of, between all those guys, including Dylan Moses, who's out for the year, 466 total tackles, 55.5 tackles for loss, and 30.5 sacks. If that was any other team other than Alabama and Clemson, you would think, man, they're going to be 8-4, 9-3 this year. Guess what? It's Alabama. They'll reload. They'll be fine. They'll probably lose I think they won't be as good on defense, but guess what? Their offense is only going to be better than it was last year, most likely. The only offensive piece they really did lose of their skill positions was tight end Irv Smith Jr., and he went to the NFL draft. He's a Minnesota Viking right now. I think he'll have a long, productive career there. I think he's probably a better pass catcher than O.J. Howard out of college, but I think O.J. Howard is more freaky, more athletic than he is. But key returning, they bring back everyone's probably top 3 in Heisman, whatever way you want to slice it. Him, Trevor Lawrence, Jonathan Taylor seem to be the big picks. Tua Tagovailoa, 3,966 yards, 43 touchdowns, and only 6 interceptions. I will say about him, though, he's fragile. He seems to be on the sideline a lot. And to me, I think he's a bit overrated, and I know I might get killed in the comments for that, but I think he is. I just think he predetermines where he wants to go with the football before the play happens. And versus elite teams, you can't do that. The Clemsons, the Georgias, the Mississippi States, who was elite on defense last year, those teams on defense, you saw he struggled mightily versus those teams and didn't finish the game versus 2 of those teams. Actually, all 3. He didn't even finish the Clemson game, so he didn't finish the game in any of those games. But you can do that because guess what? You have the best receiving core in the nation, and it's not close. Their top 4 wide receivers are amazing. They're all going to play in the NFL. They're all going to probably be first day picks. If not first day picks, then they'll be first and second round picks. Judy Biletnikoff, best wide receiver in the country. That's the award he won last year. Might win it again. Probably will win it again. They have Henry Ruggs, Jalen Waddle, and Devonta Smith coming back. Jalen Waddle is the fastest human being I've ever seen on a football field. That man can fly. I can't wait till the 40-yard dash for the combine comes because I think he can run a 4.3, 4.25, somewhere between those numbers. Like I said, they reload every year. I'm going 11-1. I can't have them going 12-0. Like I said, I'm not going to choose many teams to go 12-0. Right now, I only have one in Clemson, and that's because they play in a very easy conference and they are loaded across the board. If Alabama played in the ACC, I would have them going undefeated. If Clemson played in the SEC West, I would have them probably losing one game. They win versus Duke. That's going to be a bloodbath in Atlanta. It's not going to be a fun game for Duke. Spread on that game, last time I checked, was 36 points. So everyone expects that to be a bloodbath. They play New Mexico State at home, another bloodbath. Then they go on the road at South Carolina. And that's an interesting game because, as Gamecocks fans would like to say, the last time you played them, you beat them. Guess what? The last time you played them, you got Alshon Jeffrey and Marcus Lattimore. You don't have them anymore. You're not beating them. That's a win for Alabama. Then they play Southern Miss. That's a snooze fest. Another win. Ole Miss at home. A win. Bye. On the road versus A&M. Everyone is predicting this game to be the loss. And that is why I'm not. Because every time everyone else does the same thing, guess what? That doesn't happen. Everyone last year was predicting Alabama to win the championship versus Clemson. I thought Clemson was going to win. Just because usually when everyone predicts something, it doesn't come true. Very rarely that happens. Guess what? It's not coming true this year. They're beating A&M on the road. Guess what? They got a bye before that. A&M does as well, but I'm still taking Bama to win that game in A&M. Then they play Tennessee at home. Tennessee just doesn't have the boys to keep up with them this year. Bama wins again at home. Arkansas at home. Win. Bye again. Their two hardest games are off of a bye. At Texas A&M, then LSU at home. I don't know who makes the schedules for the SEC, but Bama is lining that person's pockets because I don't see how you got a bye before each of those weeks. You're winning that game. Then you go on the road versus Mississippi State. Guess what? I have a loss here. This is where I think they're going to trip up. I don't think they're going 12-0, and I just think the two games that people are going to look at are A&M, and then, of course, the rivalry game at the end of the year, the Iron Bowl at Auburn. I don't see Auburn beating them this year. And moving on from that game, they play Western Carolina. That's an easy win. Another easy game before their last game this year, before the last game of the year, like almost every SEC team does. They play Auburn, and that's a win. So I have them at 11-1, like I said. I think they'll probably win the SEC West, but you'll have to stay tuned later for our college football playoff predictions and champions of each conference video. The next team I have is the Arkansas Razorbacks, who were a disgrace last year. They were terrible. They weren't good. 115th in the country on offense with 21.7 points per game, which for a former offensive coordinator from Clemson, you'd think he'd do better than Chad Morris, but he's not doing better. Defensive rank, 108th in the country, 34.8 points per game. I'll give him a break on that one. He's not a defensive kind of guy, but offense should be much better. 5-year recruiting average is 29th and 23rd in 2019. I'm sorry, but if you're recruiting at that type of level and you're going 2-10, that's not good. And that's what they were last year, 2-10 and an 0-8 in conference, which is pathetic. Key losses: linebacker Dre Greenlaw, only player on the team with 2 or more interceptions, sacks, and tackles for loss. Guess what? He was drafted. He was good enough to get drafted. He was one of the only bright spots on that defense. Along with defensive tackle Armon Watts, leader in sacks with 7, and he was also drafted in the 6th round. So you had 2 guys in the NFL, and you were 108th in the country on defense. That doesn't add up. Something's disconnected there. You have to get better. I don't understand why you were that bad, but you were that bad. It's probably not going to get much better this year. Key returning, running back Rakeem Boyd, 734 yards, 6 yards per carry, and only 2 touchdowns. Linebacker Dejon Harris led team in tackles, 118 tackles, 233 tackles the last 2 years. So that's a lot of tackles. Glad to have him back, especially on a bad defense. You need some leaders there, otherwise it's probably only going to get worse. Defensive lineman McTelvin Agum, he was first in tackles for loss and second in sacks with 4.5. This team has to get better. If it doesn't, Chad Morris is probably going to be fired. I think this is his 3rd year, and that's all they're probably going to give him because Arkansas, even under Brett Bielema, won 5 games in his worst year. And there were even years where they won 7 and sometimes 8. They had good players. Trey Flowers, right off the top of my head, comes to mind. He's a good player in the NFL. And there's much more players I can't think of right now, but they actually produced NFL talent. They produced 2 guys last year, but There was actually the production and the wins went together with Brett Bielema. He had 3 or 4 NFL guys, and guess what? He won 7 or 8 games. You have 1 to 2 NFL guys, you should win 5 to 6 games. Guess what? You're only winning 2 to 3 games. That's not acceptable. This year, I think you'll go 4-8. I think you'll win versus Portland State. You'll lose on the road at Ole Miss. Win versus Colorado State. Win versus San Jose State. And I'm being generous. They could lose to Colorado State. Loss versus Texas A&M. Then they have a bye week. Then they play at Kentucky. That's a loss. A loss versus Auburn. A loss at Bama. A loss versus Mississippi State. A win on the road or win at home versus Western Kentucky. A bye. Then they finish out their season with back-to-back losses at LSU and at home to Missouri. So 4-8. They could easily be 3-9 though. And I think with that record, Chad Morris is probably gone. And Arkansas fans will probably say good riddance. Next, we have the Auburn Tigers, who were pretty good last year, but not great. They were 8-5 and 3-5 in the SEC. And they finished out the season very well, manhandling Purdue. I think the final score of the game was 62-7. They absolutely destroyed Purdue in that game. Their offense was 48th in the country last year with 30.9 points per game. Their defensive rank was 14th in the country with 19.2 points per game. 5-year recruiting is 9th, and last year they were 11th. Key losses: quarterback Jarrett Stidham, who's playing pretty well under Bill Belichick's leadership in New England, and I think he might be the heir apparent to Tom Brady. He didn't perform at the level I thought he was going to, or even Auburn fans, because when he was at Baylor, I'm a Texas fan, so I got to watch him a lot. He impressed me. I mean, he threw for a lot of yards. He was accurate with the football. He pushed the ball down the field, and then the Art Briles stuff went down, and he went and transferred to Auburn. And I think after watching him, I think that had more to do with with Art Briles, his statistics did, than it was to do with him, because he wasn't great at Auburn. I think he left a lot on the table, and maybe it was Auburn's fault. Maybe they didn't coach him right. They also lose both leading wide receivers in Darius Slate and Ryan Davis. They've combined for over 1,200 yards and 6 touchdowns between the two of them. And they also lose Deshaun Davis, first in tackles with 112. So they lose both starting wide receivers who were good players for them, especially since, you combine for a third of his touchdowns between the two, so you're going to have to find someone to count for that. Key returning, Anthony Schwartz, speedster, track star, can absolutely fly, probably the fastest person in college football. He's very quick. They also bring back another speedster in Eli Stove. This team has speed all across the board. They also have a cornerback in Javarius Dean, who was second in passes defended last year, and he can fly too. He's a speedster. And they also have the best line in college football, defensive line. I don't think that's really debatable. They have Derek Brown, who's going to be a first-round pick after this year if he stays healthy. He was second with 4.5 sacks and 10, and he was also second in tackles for loss with 10.5. And defensive lineman Nick Coe, who was first in sacks with 7 and 13.5 tackles for loss. He'll be an NFL draftee as well. He won't be as high as Derek Brown. Derek Brown has more upside and was just a higher recruit out of high school, so he's going to get the benefit of the doubt, even if he has worse numbers than Nick Coe. Like I said, they bring back Javarius Dean, who is one of the fastest players in college football. I'd love to see a race between him and Anthony Schwartz. I think that'd be fun. They also bring back defensive tackle Marlon Davidson. So they have 3, that's another NFL prospect. 3 NFL prospects, 3 guys that are going to be drafted in the top 5 rounds of the NFL draft on the defensive line. This isn't as good as Clemson's defensive line last year, but it's pretty close. It's very good, and it's the best in college football. Running back Jatarius Whitlow had 960 yards from scrimmage with 8 touchdowns, but he's not the type of running back Gus Malzahn wants. Gus Malzahn likes to find one running back and just run him into the ground. He likes his Trey Masons, Kerryon Johnsons. I'm sure I'm forgetting someone else, and after this video I'll probably remember. But guys like that he can just hand the ball off to 300 times in a year, and they hit a brick wall constantly. But guess what? He keeps handing it off to them. They average usually 4.5, the 5.5 yards a carry, but you have so many carries that they have 1,500 to 2,000 yards, depending on the talent level. And he usually just likes to run one running back straight into the ground. Now what is exciting for Georgia or for Auburn fans? Excuse me, I know that's sacrilege what I just said, but quarterback Bo Nix, 5-star quarterback, high upside, high potential. I think he'll be good. I just don't know about this year because being a freshman and playing quarterback, I've only seen a couple guys succeed very well under those circumstances. So we'll have to see with Bo Nix. I have them going 7-5. I think they could go 8-4, but I think 8-4 is kind of the ceiling for this team. I think 6-6 is kind of the floor. They started the game in Arlington, Texas tomorrow night. It's going to be a very fun game. I can't wait to watch it. I'm super excited for this game. Oregon versus Auburn. And if you watch the Pac-12 preview, you already know I have Oregon winning this game. I just think Oregon's offensive line is going to be able to handle Auburn's defensive line. And that's strength versus strength. That's a top 5 unit in the country versus another top 5 unit in the country going head-to-head. And I think Oregon's going to win that battle, which makes them win that game. So that's a loss for Auburn. Then they have a win versus Tulane and Kent State back-to-back. Then they're on the road at Texas A&M. I have a loss there. I have a win versus Mississippi State, a loss at Florida, a bye week, then a win at Arkansas, and then on the road versus LSU, a loss. A win versus Ole Miss, another bye week. Then you have Georgia, Samford, and Bama closing out the season. I think you go 2-3 in those games. You beat Georgia and Samford, but you lose to Bama, and that puts you at 7-5. No, I'm sorry, that puts you at 8-4. So I had you originally at 7-5 and moved you up to 8-4. So I have them at 8-4, and I think that's about as good as Auburn fans should expect this year. Maybe if you win those games and then add on Oregon, that's 9-3. But I just feel like if you beat Oregon, you're going to lose to someone you're not supposed to. That's usually how college football works. 19 to 20-year-old kids, it's hard for them to keep them concentrated on the task at hand. And I just feel like you're going 8-4 this year, and that's the record I have you on. LSU, a lot of hype for this team. I've heard this for many years. Oh, the offense is going to be better. Oh, the offense is going to be different. It's been pretty much the same. There was a little bit of movement in the offensive decision-making last year with the coaching staff, but not a lot. This year, they hired Joe Brady, who used to work for the Saints as their passing game coordinator, and he's going to be working as their LSU's passing game coordinator and wide receivers coach. So maybe he can make some tweaks to make this offense more explosive. They have the talent. They recruit in the top 10 every year. Their 5-year recruiting average is 7th and 5th in 2019. And last year they were decent on offense. They were 38th in the country with 32.4 points per game. And their defense was 26th in the country with 21.8 points per game. And I'm going to be honest, that's kind of lower than I expected, especially with Devin White, Greedy Williams, Grant Delpit, etc., on that team. That team is loaded on the defensive side of the football. But I think that had a lot to do with, like I said, their offense isn't as explosive as it should be. And hopefully Joe Brady can come in and change that. Key losses, Devin White. Him and Roquan Smith are probably the 2 best middle linebackers to play in the SEC in the last 20 years. They're that good. Devin White, I don't think is as good as Roquan Smith, but he's close. 123 tackles first on the team, 12 tackles for loss, and 2 sacks. All-around playmaker. I wanted my Denver Broncos to get him. He didn't fall in the draft to 10. I wish he would have. He's going to be a stud in the NFL. They also lose cornerback Greedy Williams. Like I said earlier in the SEC East preview prediction video, he's a good player, but he did not like to tackle. He's going to have to tackle better in the NFL if he wants to play a lot for the Browns. We'll see. I think with him falling to the second round, that may have put a chip on his shoulder to make him want to tackle more, so he can prove people wrong. We'll see about that, though. Key returning, Joe Burrow. Another quarterback in the SEC I just think is overrated. I don't think he's very good. I think it's a lot of heart, but a lack of talent. I just don't think he's very talented, but I think he's a very good leader. He had 2,894 passing yards, 16 touchdowns, and 5 interceptions, and here comes what I was talking about. 57.8% completion percentage. That is not good enough. Plus, you have talent on that outside, where if you throw the ball close, they're going to catch it. Their wide receivers are good. They're all 3 to 5-star recruits. They're good enough to get the job done. He's just not able to plant his feet and throw the football accurately, and I don't know why that is. We'll have to see if he gets better this year at it. Wide receiver Justin Jefferson was their leading receiver with 54 receptions, 875 yards, and 6 touchdowns. and he was the playmaker. If you looked at their depth chart and the stats from last year, he has, I believe, 20 more receptions than anyone and more than double the yards of anyone. He is very important on the offensive end at wide receiver. He's their best one. And then the best defensive player in college football, Grant Delpit. I don't think you can really debate that. Maybe you can. Maybe you want to drop a comment down below and try to argue with me on that. I don't think it's debatable. 5 sacks, 5 interceptions, and 9 passes defended. He led the team in sacks with five, which is absolutely crazy for a safety to do that. I think he was actually second or third on sacks. So correct me if I'm wrong on that. But I know for a fact he led the team in interceptions with 5, and that's crazy to have 5 sacks, 5 interceptions. And he also had more than 5 tackles for loss as well. He's an absolute stud. If he was in the draft last year, he would have been probably a top 15 pick. The guy's the best player on defense in college football. Defensive back Christian Fulton, he was actually hurt for most of the year last year. He's a stud as well. Ed Ogeron said this is probably his best defensive backfield he's ever had. And he's coached Troy Polamalu at USC. He's also coached Jamal Adams and players of that sort at LSU. So he knows what he's talking about when he talks about that. They bring back Rashard Lawrence, defensive tackle, who was second in sacks. Linebackers Michael Divinity and Patrick Queen. These are all NFL prospects. They're loaded on defense. And we haven't even gotten to a guy like Derek Stingley, the freshman this year, who's probably going to start. He's a stud as well. It's DBU. For the past 10 years, they have been heavily stacked at defensive back. Morris Claiborne, Tyrann Mathieu, Patrick Peterson. It goes on. They're loaded always on defense, especially the defensive backs. Jamal Adams. Moving on from that, they also have a very highly recruited running back in John Emery, and I think he'll probably get the start this year. Like I said, they recruit well, and I have them going, and this hurts to say because there's only one loss that I have on their schedule, and it's not my Texas Longhorns. Unfortunately, I just don't think we're deep enough this year to go up against them. I think next year we probably can. But wins versus Georgia Southern, wins at Texas. But that game's going to be close. People are saying, oh, LSU's going to blow out Texas. No, they're not. We saw what happened down in the Sugar Bowl, and you can say Georgia didn't care. Guess what? We manhandled them. That was about physicality. And we can go up physically with LSU. I just think they have the DBs to cover our wide receivers, and that's the strength of our team. The win versus Northwestern State, a win at Vandy, a bye week, then a win versus Utah State, a win versus Florida, a win at Mississippi State, a win versus Auburn, then a bye week. And here's the loss. If this was any other team after your bye week, I think you'd win this game. Other than Alabama, you're not beating Alabama. You haven't beaten Alabama in a long time. I think the last time was that 9-6 game at Alabama. It's not happening. Again, a win at Ole Miss, a win versus Arkansas, and a win versus Texas A&M. The worst I see here is probably 8-4, and that's iffy. I think you're for sure going 9-3. But 8-4, if you said, if Florida's gonna be much improved, you could lose them, but I just don't see it. So I have you at 11-1. Next up, we have Ole Miss. They made a lot of changes on their coaching staff. I think they probably have the best. Now, they don't have the best head coach. Don't get me wrong there. I'm saying they have the best combo of offensive coordinator, head coach, and defensive coordinator. They have Rich Rodriguez, who's a genius on offense, offensive coordinator. Head coach is Matt Luke. He's not very good. But then you also have Mike McIntyre, the former Colorado coach, who's a very good defensive coordinator. So I think your coaching staff is magnificent. I just don't think you'll get the results you think out of that coaching staff. Last year, they were 30th in the country with 33.9 points per game on offense and 114th in the country with 36.2 points per game on defense. Returning production is 116th, so very low, and that's out of 130 teams. The recruiting is 21st in the country over the last 5 years, but you bought a lot of those players. Sorry, you hear something? Yeah, we'll forget about that. But they're 22nd in the country in 2019. Key losses: Jordan Ta'amu, 3,900 plus yards, 19 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. But when you throw it a lot like they did last year, that's not very hard to get those numbers out of a quarterback. I think you can get that out of Matt Corral this year. Matt Carroll, I'm not really sure how to pronounce that name. But they lose all 3 of their wide receivers. A.J. Brown, gone. D.K. Metcalf, gone. DeMarcus Lodge, gone. Those guys combined for over 160 receptions, over 2,700 yards, and more than and 15 touchdowns. You also lose Dawson Knox, who wasn't a big key to that offense. He didn't have much production, but he was a good blocker. But he is an NFL player, so the NFL obviously liked him. And that's just a lot to lose on offense, especially, I mean, you lose all three wide receivers, your quarterback, and your tight end. But what I will say is Matt Corral can establish his own chemistry with the wide receivers coming in. So maybe that's a silver lining there to look at. Key returning, you returns running back Scotty Phillips, 928 yards and 6.1 yards per carry, and 12 touchdowns as well. You also returned 8 of the 9 leading tacklers on defense. So you were 114th on defense this year. I wouldn't be surprised if you jump up to around the 80 to 90 mark with Mike McIntyre and a lot of players coming back. I could see that. I think they're going to be, I believe I have them going 4-8 this year. I might have them going 5-7. Let's add this up. We'll see. Memphis, at Memphis. You could win this game, but I think Memphis is one of the best Power 5 teams. I think they're probably in the top 3 of that department, along with Cincinnati and UCF. So we'll have to see about that. And Army, by the way. So probably the 4th best Power 5 or non-Power 5 team. Then you have a win versus Arkansas, a win versus Southeastern Louisiana, a win versus Cal. So you start out 3-1. Now, you could start out 2-2. Like I said, I think you can lose to Memphis. I don't think Cal's that good this year. I think I had them going 3-9 in our Pac-12 preview. Then you play at Bama. That's a loss. You play Vandy. I have a loss there. I have a loss at Missouri, a loss versus Texas A&M, and then a bye week. And I have a loss at Auburn, a win versus New Mexico State, a loss versus LSU, and then a bye week, and then you go on the road at Mississippi State, and I think you lose that game. So I have you at 4-8. That's what I have you at. You could go 5-7, but you could also go 3-9. So I picked right in the middle there, 4-9. I think that's on par with what you'll go. Next, we'll go to their rival in Mississippi State. They were 68th on defense or on offense last year with 28.5 points per game. And second on defense, they were stout on defense. They had a lot of NFL talent that's no longer there. They had 13.2 points per game, which was second in the country. Returning production, here it is, 92nd, so low. 5-year recruiting average, 24th, a little bit higher than I thought. I thought you'd be in the high 20s, low 30s. They were 24th in 2019 as well, so same as the average over the 5 years. And then key losses, you lose a lot. Now, this first key loss, I don't actually think is a loss with quarterback Tommy Stevens transferring from Penn State. And with Joe Moorhead, he kind of knows Tommy Stevens' strengths and weaknesses because he was there as the offensive coordinator. So I think you'll be better at the position, but I'm going to list him there because he started for 3 years. And Nick Fitzgerald, 1,767 yards passing, 19 touchdowns, 51.6% completion percentage. The guy could not throw the football, but he could run it. 1,121 yards. He was their leading rusher last year. Also the leader in touchdowns rushing with 13. They also lose Jonathan Abram, leading tackle with 99. He's on the Oakland Raiders now. If you've watched Hard Knocks, he's pretty cocky, pretty loudmouth. But you have to be able to play a position like that. You're usually most of the time back there to clean up people's mistakes, and you have to be confident in the routes you take to get to those tacklers and to the football when it's in the air. So I don't blame him for being cocky and confident. And guess what? It got him to where he was. He was a JUCO player originally, and now he's in the NFL with the Oakland Raiders. So it worked out. Defensive tackle Jeffrey Simmons. He was the leader in tackles for loss with 18. This guy's a stud. He's going to be a good player. I think he's out for the year. I may have gotten him and Montez Sweat mixed up. One of them is out for the year. And the next player we're going to talk about is the aforementioned Montez Sweat. Leader in sacks with 12. Stud. He's on the Washington Redskins. He's going to help them out a lot. This defensive line was the second best in the country last year. That's not debate. Number one's not for the debate either. Clemson had the best. But this was the second best in the second best defense according to points per game stat. Key returning, Cameron Dantzler. He's going to have to become the leader of the secondary. Someone has to take over for Jonathan Abram on the back end, and I think it's going to have to be him. Linebackers Leo Lewis and Willie Gay and Errol Thompson will have to be better up the middle because you lose a lot of them. You lose Jeffrey Simmons, and you also lose, like I said, Jonathan Abram. All those guys are straight up the middle of the defense, so you need to replace that. And hopefully your linebackers, if that's not replaced, can step up, and that can make a difference as well. Chauncey Rivers replaces Montez Sweat. He had 7.5 tackles for loss and 3 sacks last year. So in the spare time he did get to play, he played pretty well. So I think he'll do a decent job of replacing Montez Sweat, but I don't think he'll be able to replace the full production that Montez Sweat leaves. I have them going 8-4. I think they're going to be good, a lot better on the offensive side because, like I said, Tommy Stevens knows how to run Joe Moorhead's system because he was under it at Penn State. So I think they'll be better there. Obviously, they're not going to be second on defense. I think they'll probably be in the 25 to 40 range, somewhere in between there. I don't expect them to just fall off the cliff and go down to its like 70s or 80s. But I expect their offense to step up, and that's why I'm going 8-4. They started the season with Louisiana. I have a win there. I have a win in the second game versus Southern Miss, a win versus Kansas State, third game, a win versus Kentucky in the fourth game. So you start out 4-0. Then you go on the road. You lose to Auburn on the road. You have a bye week. Then you lose back-to-back games at home versus Tennessee and LSU. And then I have you losing at Texas A&M. I have you winning at Arkansas. Then there's a bye week. Here's the game. Everyone's going to question. I think you were going to beat Bama. I think someone has to beat them, and I think this is an out-of-the-blue pick, and I just think this game, when I saw it, it jumped off the schedule, and I just had to put it down as a win, so I did. I'll probably be wrong, but hey, I'm going to go for it. Win versus Bama, a win versus Abilene Christian, and a win versus Ole Miss, so you win the last 3 games of your season, and that puts you at 8-4, and you were sitting at 5-4 at one point, so you have to be pretty happy with 8-4 if that's how the season turns out. The next team I have is Texas A&M, who went 9-4 in Jimbo Fisher's first year. I think he'll get this program turned around. I hate to say it because I'm a Texas fan, but he recruits too well. He knows the offensive side of the football too well. They were 19th in the country with 36 points per game. They were 47th in the country with 25.3 points per game on defense. Returning production, 102nd. So everyone's very high on this team, and then I was before I looked at that and looked at the players they lost because they lose a lot of players. The one player they do return who's a very underrated player, and Kellen Mond, he will help them probably overachieve of what they should achieve this year just because the amount they lost. They probably shouldn't be as good as they're going to be because of him. 5-year recruiting, 13th. Last year they were 4th. I think you can expect this team to be in the top 10 in recruiting from here on out if Jimbo Fisher, especially if he gets it rolling. But either way, he's a great recruiter. He'll have him in the top 10, at least, maybe even higher. Key losses, Travion Williams, the leader in rushing in the SEC last year, was 1,760 yards, 6.5 yards per carry, and a whopping 18 touchdowns. Tight end Jay Sternberger. Kansas, what are you doing? He transferred. You never used him. Was one of, if not the best tight ends in college football last year. He led them in receiving in all categories, receptions, yards, and touchdowns, and you just let him walk. I don't know what they were doing at Kansas last year. I don't know what David Beatty was doing. They lose him to the NFL. They also lose defensive end Kingsley Keke, leader in sacks with 7.5. And they lose their big run plugger up the middle in Daylon Mack. And they lose both their leading tacklers and linebackers, Otero Alaka and Tyrell Dodson. So you lose your probably your 3 best players on defense in Kingsley Keke, Otero Alaka, and Tyrell Dodson. And Daylon Mack wasn't far behind. He's a good player as well. Key returning, though, like I said, Kellen Mond. I think he's a top probably 7 quarterback in college football. He's very good. 3,107 yards, 24 touchdowns, and 9 interceptions. And the thing about him, what everyone wants to see, they want to see you play your best in big games. Played great in the Clemson game. Played great in other big games down the stretch. He's a good quarterback. He's going to prove a lot of people wrong if you think he's not. They return all 4 of their leading wide receivers other than Jay Sternberger, who was their leading. They returned the 4 guys after that, and Courtney Davis, Cameron Buckley, and Jamon Osborne, along with Kendrick Rogers. So you have all your wide receivers back, and Jimbo Fisher likes to play out of the shotgun and run 4 wide receivers, 5 wide receivers sometimes. So I think they'll be pretty successful with that. They also bring back cornerbacks Miles Jones and Oliver Perkins. They're both going to have to step up, but they played well last year. They were 1st and 2nd in passes defended with 8 and 9, respectively. And they're going to have to step up because, like I said, they lost a lot on defense. And usually when you lose a lot from your linebackers and defensive line like they did, the secondaries are the ones that are going to have to step up because it's really hard to replace all those guys up front with new faces and have them step up right away. I think they'll be able to step up later in the year because they're talented, but not right away. I have this team going 8-4. I just think the schedule's too hard. Again, another team that plays the 1, 2, and 3 team in the AP poll. All 3 teams they play. And I think that's just too hard to ask for a team to go like 9-3 or 10-2 versus the schedule. They play Texas State. This is after the Texas State game. This video is going to come out. And this game already happened, actually. I would have picked them to win versus Texas State anyways. That's a win, and they already have that under the belt. Then they play Clemson on the road. It's going to be a fun game. Those 2 games, LSU and Texas, and Clemson and Texas A&M, are going to be really fun games. It's at Clemson, though. That's a loss. Then they roll off wins versus Lamar, Auburn, and Arkansas, all at home. Then you have a bye week. Then you have Bama at home. I think you can win this game, but I don't have you winning this game. Bama wins this game. Then you have a win at Ole Miss, a win versus Mississippi State, a win versus University of Texas San Antonio. Sorry, brain fart there for a second. And then bye week, and then South Carolina and at Georgia. I have a win at home, actually, versus South Carolina, and then a loss at Georgia. And then you also lose the last game of the season to LSU at LSU. So that makes you 8-4. In that game, I don't see it. That's the one game on the schedule I'm putting 0 chance of winning. I think you even have a higher chance of winning at Clemson. I'll tell you why. LSU is pissed off they lost that game last year. 6 overtime game where they got screwed by their officials. They didn't think they should have been in those 6 overtimes. They think they should have won in regulation. LSU's winning that game, no doubt. That'll do it for the SEC West. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like button if you liked it. Please hit the subscribe button if you want more content like this in the future, if you want to watch more content like this in the future. And please hit the notification button so you get when these videos drop, so you get them right away and you can watch them right away. Thanks for watching.